This is our first forum we've held on this topic, being grants, and it's one that we really wanted to do to support our community, to strengthen capacity in writing and attracting funding for community projects. We did hope to do this in person, but with current restrictions with COVID-19, undertaking the online version was our best thing to do in this instance, rather than delay, considering our community grants did open up today. We have an exciting lineup of presentations tonight, which where we hope will provide some clarity and support for anyone looking to source funding for their local community organisation. But firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Barappa Barappa, Yorta Yorta and Wamba Wamba people as the traditional owners of the land now known as Gannawarra. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their rich culture and connection to country. And from this, we'd like to Welcome to Country video for you now.
Gannawarra Shire is on the central lands of the Barappa Barappa, the Wamba Wamba and the Yorta Yorta people.
We respectfully acknowledge the people who came before us and cared for this land, the elders who guide us every day, and our emerging leaders, our children and youth.
We are proud of our heritage,
our stories,
our sunsets and sunrises,
our beautiful tall gum trees,
the mighty Murray riverlands and waterways.
It is up to all of us to support and nurture our community for future generations.
Welcome to our country.
Lovely. So just some brief housekeeping for tonight. Your microphones will be muted during the presentations that we'll have. If you have any questions, which we really encourage during the presentation, if you could type those into the chat bar at any time during the night, and we'll refer to those in the Q&A session towards the end of the forum. And just note, we will be recording this session to assist others who can't make it. Our first presentation tonight is Ellen White. So I've had the privilege of working with Ellen in the past, and there's a little introduction for those who don't know who she is. Ellen emigrated from Scotland in 1991 and lived in Melbourne until 1999, where she moved to her husband's grain farm in Tawanini, near Witchyproof, or just over the border of Gannawarra. Originally a biology and chemistry teacher, Ellen is passionate about lifelong learning and environmental sustainability. She's also passionate about the future sustainability of rural areas, and has worked in the community development field for the past 20 years. She was first elected as a councillor to the Gannawarra Shire Council in 2008, and recently completed her third term, finishing up late last year. So Ellen is also a graduate and current member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. In her other community leadership roles, she's the chair of the North Central LEN, a women's health Loddon Mallee board member, and president of the Witchyproof and District Landcare Group. Her current role involves assessing grants for the Foundation for Renewal and Regional Renewal, which is FRRR, as many of us would know, and working with communities on strategic planning. So Ellen is speaking tonight on what makes a good project and application, and give us some insight into what assessment panels would look for in an application too. So thank you and welcome, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that introduction. It's always a bit daunting when you hear yourself being introduced, isn't it? But thank you for that. I'll just put my presentation up. I know we're a wee bit time limited, so we don't want to waste too much time. And as you said, Paul, hopefully this will come up now. Can everyone see the presentation? Yep. Not sure why it's not going to the presentation format, but all right, there we go. Yeah. And can I just say, that was a really lovely way to do the welcome to country. I think in these days where we can't all be in the same room, it's still important to do a welcome to country, and congratulations to the Gannawarra Shire on putting together such a beautiful little film clip with the elders to make sure that is something that continues. As Paul says, I have been working in community development for longer than I care to remember sometimes, and I've written many, many grant applications, from very small ones for $500 right up to ones that have attracted hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm happy to share some of my knowledge with you tonight. As well as writing grant applications, I've also got quite a fair bit of experience in assessing or making decisions about grants as well. In my role with the ACFE, Adult Community and Further Education Board, a few years ago, we used to assess grant applications for their local organisations. I've also done some work with the Area Consultative Committee, with the Catchment Management Authority. And as Paul says, I'm now with FRRR, the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal. And my main job there is actually assessing grants. So while I've titled this presentation Writing Successful Grant Applications, I will actually talk about assessment as well. And yes, please put your questions into the chat box so that we can come to them later on. I think one of the first things to think about when you are writing a grant application is to take a step back before you even start writing and make sure that you're actually writing a grant application for something that is actually needed. Most funders have got a bucket of money that they have got from hard work from themselves, and they want to use it to benefit community groups, organisations or individuals. And so it's important for them that it's clear that there is a benefit to the community and that a project is really well thought through before someone gets their hard-earned cash, I suppose. And so don't write a funding application just because the funding opportunity is there. Think about the project that you really want to fund and develop that up, and then go and look for the right bucket of fund to actually support your project. And when you are actually developing up that project, and we'll go through this in a wee bit more detail, you know, make sure that you've brought others in, that there's a few partnerships there. And when I say partnerships, it could be, you know, partnership with council or partnership with other funding bodies, but it could easily just be a partnership with other organisations or individuals or businesses in your own community as well. So I guess the most important thing is be strategic. When it comes to writing your applications, be strategic. Make sure you know what it is that you want to do, why you want to do it, how you're going to do it, and so on. And talk to other people about it as well. You know, for example, let's say that the activity room in the local neighbourhood house is drafty and it's freezing in winter and roasting in the summer, and every group that comes in to use it mentions that. And so it's important then to perhaps have a discussion with those different groups, and those different groups could be your partners. Each of those groups will have some ideas on how to fix that problem, find a solution. And it might be someone might want to retrofit, someone might want to buy a reverse cycle air conditioning, someone might want to rebuild. And so bringing all of those groups together to actually talk about the problem and to brainstorm a solution is really the first step in being strategic about developing up your project and therefore writing your grant application. Now there's lots of funding sources around, and knowing where to look for them is really the key. The first one on the list there you'll see is Gannawarra, and I know Katrina will talk about that later on. But it's always, I think it's good to look locally before you go too far out, because sometimes you might find that there are people, businesses and council perhaps, or other organisations that do have some funding that are willing to help, especially if it's only a small amount that you need. You know, for example, a Lions Clubs and Rotary often do community fundraising so that they can support local organisations. So, you know, have a look at what's around locally, as well as looking at some of those other funding sources that I've listed there. Grant Guru and the Community Grants and the Grants Hub, they have compilations of grants that are open all the time. And, you know, so every month they'll send you a newsletter and you can go in and have a look and see what's available in your area or for the specific kind of project that you want or the specific group that you belong to as well. And so it's worthwhile, you know, especially if you've got a big project that might cost $400,000, for example, you might need to look at different sources of funding. So it's worthwhile just keeping your eye open and having a look at some of the grant opportunities that are around, using those search engines. The FRRR one, you can see the picture of the website there at the bottom of the screen. They actually have a number of grants that they administer regularly throughout the year, and they are targeted. Many of them are targeted towards specific groups or for specific purposes. But you'll see on the bottom left of your screen there, you can see that button there that says find the right grant programme. Just by answering a few simple questions, you can actually be taken to the grants that are going to help you to find what you're looking for. And can I say that FRRR and some of those other sites there have really great tips on writing grant applications and ideas to help you as well as what you're going to get tonight from myself and the others who will be speaking. So before you start, as an assessor, but also as a grant writer, I think the very first thing that everyone should do is read the guidelines of that particular grant that you're applying for. As an assessor, there's nothing worse when I look at a grant and discover that the application for the project that the person is applying for isn't eligible. You know, so it's obviously that they haven't read the guidelines that says this is a programme to fund small equipment grants for community organisations. And what this organisation is applying for is actually to build a shed for a new community group, like a men's shed or something to store their equipment. So it's really important that, you know, before you start writing the grants, read the guidelines. If you're not sure when you read the guidelines, if you've still got some questions, there's usually a contact person listed as well. And I would suggest that bringing that person, whether it's someone in the local council or if it is someone in an organisation like FRRR, ring the contact person. It starts to build that relationship with them. gives them an understanding of what it is that you're trying to do, and then they can advise you whether, well, this grant isn't really for you, but here's another one that is, or yes, your project is eligible and here's what you should do. So it is really worthwhile contacting that person if you have the time to do that. And you can do that by email or by telephone, whatever you're more comfortable with. The second thing is, and I kind of alluded to this, is check if your organisation is eligible. Sometimes grants programmes are for specific groups. They might be for not-for-profit groups that have DGR status, so deductible gift recipient status, or it might be for sporting groups only, or it could be for specifically for neighbourhood houses or so on. So, you know, it is important to make sure that your organisation is eligible, and it will say that in the guidelines, whether you need to have an incorporation number, an APN, or any other specific things. And also check if your project is eligible as well, as I mentioned before. No point in spending hours writing a grant application if your project is just not going to cut it there. And do the timeline suit you? So, excuse me, for example, if you're applying for a grant to run a comedy show in Kerrang in the middle of November, but the grant isn't announced until the end of November, then there's no point in applying for that grant, because if the grant's not going to be announced until the end of November, your project will have already happened, and therefore you're ineligible for the funding. So make sure that the timelines of when the grant is announced and when you need to have the project completed by actually suit the project that you're actually going to do as well. And check previous grant rounds for inspiration. You know, sometimes you've got a great idea, but you're not quite sure how to articulate it, or you know you've got this issue and you're not quite sure what the right solution is. Have a look at previous grant rounds and see what other organisations or people have written and what they've been successful in doing, and adapt their idea. It's not often that you will be able to take their idea completely. You'll have to adapt it to suit your own community and your own organisation and your own area. But it is definitely worthwhile having a wee look at what has gone before and the kind of things that have been funded before, because then you'll know that that's what the programme funding is going to be used for. And when you have opportunities to actually go to workshops like this, especially in person, but even using this format is great as well, take other people with you from your organisation, because 2 heads are better than 1, 4 heads are better than 2. And different people will take different things out of the information that they've been provided with, and it will also stimulate ideas in different ways as well, so that when you do actually come to brainstorm your ideas and develop up your funding applications, it's not just reliant on you, on one person to do all the work. You've actually got other people there who are supporting and helping, and that way it's much easier and it's much more fun as well, because the last thing you want to do is be ground down when you're doing something like this, and it can be wearing. So it's important that you're working with others, brainstorming, bouncing ideas off each other, you know, is much easier the more people that you have. Although I have heard people saying that a committee of 20 is a bit too much. So, you know, be careful how you do manage that as well. Now, when it comes to writing your application, I would say that have a think about who's going to be reading it. And as an assessor, as a grant assessor, I think it's very important. You know, I read it when I'm assessing a grant and I'm reading it for the first time, I think about the organisation that's writing it and try to apply any judgments that I have to make from a strengths-based perspective, so that you don't have to be a professor of English in order to write a good application. You just need to be able to tell your story and tell it as well as you can, but you do have to make sure that you answer all the questions. And again, that also comes back to having other people to help, you know, 2 brains are better than 1 and so on. And also comes back to contacting the funding body themselves, if there is a contact person, to help you to write the right things up. So for example, when you're trying to write a description of what your project is actually going to be, and you only have 50 words to do it, make sure you stick to only 50 words or 25 words. Sometimes you'll have 300 words. You don't have to use all 300 words. Sometimes less is more, as long as you make sure that you include all the important aspects of your project. So for example, you want to get some money to put new curtains up on the windows in that drafty room. You also want to put in a reverse cycle air conditioning when the temperatures are too extreme to cope with. And you do want to get some new floor coverings because the old wooden floor is drafty and you want to put a carpet down. So, you know, make sure that you describe your project with all the different elements in it, what you're actually looking for and what you want to do. Excuse me, so that the person who's assessing it, the person who's reading it at the other end, is quite clear. All right, that's what this is what their problem is. Describe what your problem is as well. What is the issue that you're trying to address? You know, if someone was to write an application and say, we want to make new curtains, buy a carpet and install a reverse cycle air conditioner, I would wonder, well, why do they want to do that? But if they have said, this is what our issue is, this is our problem, here is our solution, this is what it will cost, and you have quotes attached to the application to prove that that's what it will cost, and that is really important part of your application as well. And this is how we'll do it. And you know, that helps to tell the story. You keep it simple. You can, if it's more of a community resilience, community strengthening type of project, you might want to use different words. You might want to use the terminology that has been used in the guidelines of the grant application as well, to make sure that you know that you can demonstrate that you understand what they're looking for. But as I said, if you keep it simple and tell your story the way as if you're telling it to, you know, other people in your own community, then that is the best way to go. If the assessor needs more information, then they will ask for more information. So just quickly to run through that list there, and make sure you say who your organisation is as well. You know, who it is that's applying. And if you're asked for all those legal things like your ABN and tax status and so on, make sure that you do actually provide all of that. Describe what it is that you want to do, create a budget. Now, it's one thing saying that this is how much things will cost, but there may be other expenses as well. And you may have income from other sources, or if it's an event, you may have volunteers who are providing a lot of work, a lot of hours on a volunteer basis, but you can cost that in as well. So there may be permits, there may be catering costs, there may be venue hire costs. So make sure that you have all your income and your expenditure in your application and that they balance. If they don't balance, then that kind of makes you application ineligible, because it's not our job to balance your budget, that's your job to balance your budget. So it is important that you do that. And again, if you're not clear on how to do that, then give the funder a ring and talk to them about that. And if you're asked to provide letters of support, demonstrating that you have partnerships or that there's a community benefit and that other people in the community are supportive, or that someone else is happy to provide $500 or $10,000 to the cost of the project, then make sure that you have those letters of support and that they are attached to your application. If you're asked to provide quotes, make sure you attach them as well. Annual financial documents. If you're an incorporated organisation, you're often asked for your annual accounts, and while audited accounts are always important and good, best practice if you have them, if you don't have audited financial accounts, but you've got an Excel spreadsheet, or you've got an old ledger journal that you keep the accounts in, then somehow take copies of them and send them in as well, because what the assessor is looking for is that your organisation is actually trading solvent, that you do actually, even if you've only got $10 in the bank, that you've got no outstanding liabilities and so on, that you are eligible to apply. And yes, the strategic plans, project plans and communication plans, if you've got plans like that in your organisation that support your application, for example, the neighbourhood house might have in the strategic plan that they want to upgrade their facilities because of the drafty room that they use for their activities, then attaching the strategic plan as a supporting document just once again demonstrates to the assessor that well, this organisation has thought about this, and this is how this is the solution that they've come up with. So all of those things will strengthen your application. Communication plans, telling people if it's an event that you're having in particular, if that comedy festival is going to run in Kerrang, then you need to tell people about it. So how are you going to tell them about it? Social media, flyers, newspaper adverts and so on, radio. So you have to make sure that you communicate your communication plan as well. And I think it's also important to include there that you will recognise the funding body as well. Now, on the FRRR website, I did mention that there's some information as well about how to apply for grants, confirm you're eligible, and so on. And that page there, hopefully you can see it. If you can tick all of those things, then that's the time to actually then go and start writing your grants. So gather all your information first of all. Sometimes most grant applications these days are done online, and there's nothing worse than having to leave an application to go and get something and then come back, start writing an application, then you realise you need to go and get something else and so on. So if you can read through the guidelines, if you can download the application form, see what it is that you need to get together before you actually start completing the online application form itself, then that will help you, and it will mean that the application will be much easier, because it will flow quite easier then. It will flow much better, much better then. If it is an online application, make sure if you have to log in that you write down your username and your password, because it's very difficult for the funding body to continually have to help people to log into their applications if they need to. And getting to the assessment process itself, you know, it's not just a case of I get a grant application and I read it and go, yeah, that's a good one, and then we go and fund it. There's actually a whole lot of steps within it, as you can imagine. You know, the first step is validation. You are who you say you are. Your ABN is correct. The name of your organisation is correct. Some organisations are sticklers for making sure that you use the name exactly as it is on the Australian Business Register. So for example, the Wycheproof and District Landcare Group, that's the name of the whole group, but sometimes we call it the Wycheproof Landcare Group. And but if we're writing funding applications, we have to write Wycheproof and District Landcare Group. So you can look up the Australian Business Register yourself, pop in your ABN, and you will see what the name linked to the Australian Business Register is. That might sound like, oh, why do we have to do that? But some organisations want, that's the thing that defines them. That's what some organisations want. So just make sure that you are who you say you are and check everything. Make sure your project is eligible for this particular grant round. Sorry, that's what the assessor does, is make sure that your project is eligible for this particular grant round. Then the actual application is read. We call it a first read, but we read it through thoroughly and make sure that it's clear what it is that you're looking for. Make sure that all your documents are relevant and that all the documents that you've said that you've attached are actually there, and the documents that we've asked you to attach are actually there. And we also look and see if you've had any previous grants. And if all of those previous grants have had their final report submitted and their financials acquitted. And that is really important, especially for organisations that, and in fact, most funding organisations do have to be accountable to their boards and to the tax office and so on for every penny that they spend. So it's important that grant recipients acquit their programmes and projects and previous grants properly as well. And if there are outstanding final reports or acquittals, you may be asked to complete them before your application can move on to the next stage. So it's another thing to check when you are writing a funding application for the first time. If you comply with everything there, then a recommendation is made to the next stage, yes or no. And quite often the assessor is not the person who, they'll make a recommendation, but they don't make the decision. And the decision is made by a panel. And so a report is compiled from your grant application using your words as much as possible and all of the information that you've put in. And depending on the size of the grant and so on, it might be a list that goes to the panel, or it could be a half-page summary that goes to the panel, or a full-page summary that goes to the panel with a recommendation, who then meets and they decide who the successful grant applicants are. Now, if a grant round has $100,000 for that round, and they have grant applications that are worth $150,000, then someone has to make a decision about who misses out. And if the assessor has recommended $120,000 worth of grants, then the panel will decide who does miss out then. So if you can make your application stand out from the crowd by having a really good, title, summary or thought through project with really good reasons why you should get this money, then you're probably going to be at the top of that list rather than in the middle or towards the bottom. So you want to stand out as much as possible. But just, again, keeping all the other things in mind as well about eligibility and so on. And if you are unsuccessful, always ask for feedback. The feedback can be provided in an email so that you don't forget what they've said, or it may be a phone call, but take that feedback and use it for future applications to make sure that you're successful the next time. And when you've done all that, then you should be successful and be able to start your project. Now, hopefully I haven't run over time too much, Paul. I'm sorry if I have.
No, Ellen, you've done a great job. So thank you very much. And I think I took some inspiration there, checking previous grant rounds for inspiration. I thought that was really good to say. Telling your story, I think, is a really good thing that stood out for me, is how you're telling your story that your grant is, is a great project that's going to support a certain community or a certain facility or a certain project. I think is really good. And just having that supporting information that helps you justify that. So that really stood out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So what we'll do now is move on to our next presentation, which is from Katrina Thorne. So Katrina, most of you from Gannawarra may have come across Katrina at some point in time in her over 10 years with council, but to make sure that we're not unfair to her, I'll give a little introduction for her too, like I did for Ellen. So Katrina is our Coordinator Community Partnerships at Council and has worked for Council, as I said, over 10 years. She's managed and administered the Community Grants Program for the last 8 years. Growing up in Kerrang, Katrina has an appreciation and understanding of the importance community groups and clubs can play in a small town environment, and is passionate about supporting the community to build confidence and skills. Combined with their past involvement in the local basketball, tennis and netball clubs, Katrina prides herself in developing partnerships with community groups to help our local area grow and develop. So Katrina will speak now about Council's Community Grants Round, which I said earlier is open today, and explain what applicants should think about when applying and common mistakes to avoid, or what we've seen in previous rounds of Council when you're developing your application. So welcome, Katrina.
Thank you, Paul. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I am going to share my screen as well. And I guess while I do that, just to thank Paul for that introduction. It is a bit daunting to hear yourself introduced to a group of people. But yeah, my role at Council over the years has seen me be able to assist quite a few community groups to seek funding for important projects to them. My role is quite exciting too. Not only do I get to help community members build their projects up and get funding, I also have the ability to support the team within the council to apply for grants at state and federal levels as well, to deliver really important projects within our community to see tangible improvements. So that's a really exciting part of my role that I enjoy both. I get to sort of see both sides of funding coming into our community and building great things. So in the interest of keeping time, I'll push on with the presentation about Gannawarra's Community Grants Program. Something that was really reassuring listening to Ellen speak is a lot of what Ellen referred to I'll also be touching on, which is relevant to our Community Grants Program. So it's, that's just very reassuring for people that are listening, that the message is going to be quite consistent about both what an assessor looks for and how to structure your grant application is very relevant to our very specific program on community grants. So I'm going to start to just describe what the categories are and how much applicants can apply for. So Council's Community Grants Program provides 3 categories. We have a community support category, a community events category, both of which applicants can apply for up to $5,000 per application. And then we also have a major community projects fund, and that fund is for between $10,000 and $125,000 in funding. The difference being is that the major communities project fund focuses on infrastructure projects that are on non-council owned land. and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So each grant category does have a set of guidelines. So I don't expect you to be able to read what's on that screen, but all of those guidelines are available on our website as of now. So you can jump on there and have a look at them at your leisure and read through what is required for each particular category. We do really strongly encourage you to read the guidelines before sort of thinking too much about what your project might be, just to make sure, as Ellen referenced in her information, that your project does align with the particular funding stream that you're looking to apply for. Of course, once you've read the guidelines and you've been able to process that and sort of understand how your project might fit within one of those categories, you can come and discuss your project with Council's community engagement team, of which I am a part of. I'm available Monday to Friday here at Council, or you can email us on the Council Grants email address and I can respond to you that way, whatever's best suited to yourself. We're here to support your application and we can answer your questions. We cannot write your application. That's where our role stops. So, but yeah, by all means, if you've got questions or you've got queries that you're not quite sure about, please make contact with us, and that's our job here, to be able to guide you through that process to feel more encouraged to apply and more confident that your project will fit with our guidelines. And then once you believe you to be eligible and you've had a chat to us and you're feeling like that's what you need to do, you can begin your application via the online grants portal, which the link is on our website. So I'll just talk to you a little bit about the application process. So the Community Grants Program opened today, which Paul did mention, so that opened as of today, and your applications can be submitted right up until midnight on Tuesday, the 31st of August. So we've got the whole month there where applications and the information is available to apply. It is a good idea to start early, do your research. For example, with the Major Community Projects Fund, one of the essential criteria is that landowner permission is required. Depending on who the landowner of where your project is based is, those landowner permissions can sometimes take a little bit of time to come through. So we do encourage, for things like that, once you've read the guidelines and you understand what the essential criteria is, prioritise a little bit about what you might need to start working on earlier rather than later. There is nothing worse than getting to the end of the submission period and sort of running around trying to gather all your evidence or your essential criteria requirements and not being able to get them in time. So strongly encourage you to understand by reading the guidelines what we're asking for and then addressing that throughout the submission period. Write your application as though no one knows about your project. So providing detail, information, evidence, and being specific. We do have some help notes on our website as well, which if anyone wants them printed out or anything like that, Council's staff can help with that, but they're there to actually help guide you as well. So if you're reading through the guidelines or you're going through the application form and you're really just a bit stuck or you're not sure, again, you can come and talk to the staff here at Council, but we do have some help notes there to help prompt you through that process as well. Review your application or think about your project and how it links with the draft 2021-2025 Council Plan. I will talk a little bit more about the Council Plan later on, but that is a key part of the application process, is to make sure it aligns with Council's strategic vision for the next 4-year period of time. Obtaining quotes and evidence and completing your budget, making sure your income equals your expenditure and your in-kind income matches up. Again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. That is a key part of the application process, is ensuring that you've got all that information in place. Getting relevant quotes and written pledges if there's any donated materials, equipment, time, expertise. Getting all that in writing is really helpful and quite important, and then attaching that to your application. Now, again, that is quite tiny. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but I just wanted to give a little bit of an insight into the essential criteria for each category of our grants. So each category of the 3 grant program categories that we have, they each have an essential criteria that has been outlined there. Depending on which category you choose to apply for is what essential criteria you need to meet. So making sure you understand which category you are going to apply for is important there. The applications to the community support and the community events category, you must meet at least 5 essential criteria of the 8. So reading through those, You only need to meet 5, but they must be met in order for your application to proceed to an assessment process. Applications to the major communities project category must meet all 7. So it's the one on the far right there. So that's a really important one. It's a higher bucket of money, and the projects there are quite significant. So it is stated that all 7 of those essential criteria must be met. Within the Smarty Grants portal, which I will go into later, and I can show you a little bit about what that looks like, where possible, there's been prompts and hints against all of the essential criteria questions to just help applicants address those criteria and just make you sort of think about what we're asking for and how you could potentially answer those questions. I'm just going to run through just a few tips and tricks based on a history with running this program. It has, as Paul mentioned, been running now for about 8 years. There's been quite a significant amount of money invested back into our community through this program, and it's quite well known now that it's been running for so long. So it is heavily subscribed and it's very competitive. So we hope that sort of tonight we're giving people a bit of understanding and a bit of confidence to really structure your applications in a way to ensure that they get noticed and that they're competitive in the process. As Ellen referred to, the budget is critical, very important, and is one of the essential criteria in each category of our grant program. Make sure your income and your expenditure add up. So it sounds like a simple thing, but we just need to repeat it and just make sure that you're going through your figures, and at the end of the form, if it doesn't add up, go back and just check it and make sure you haven't missed anything or mistyped something. Is often something that can happen, is typing away and mistakes can happen there. When you're looking to answer the questions, just check the prompts in the application form that will help to assist you to answer those questions, and just make sure you read and reread it just to make sure that you have answered what the question is actually asking you. We really encourage community involvement and partnerships. So have you thought about whether there's ways that other groups can collaborate along with you on your project? Are there people out there that think your project's a great idea and could provide you with a letter of support to commit to showing that they think your project is a great idea, and if it's successful, they would be supportive to help it be a success? So just think about other groups within your community that you might be able to reach out to and ask questions. A good starting point potentially could be your local progress groups, local sporting clubs, service groups, etc. So just, keep that in mind. Evidence. A good application will provide reputable data to back up sort of what you're requesting your project to deliver. I have noted a couple of suggested websites there. I'm sure there are many more. They were just a couple of quick ones that I thought might be helpful just to start having a look at. And within those websites, you can drill down to specific areas of Gannawarra. So you can look at data relating back to other areas or within Gannawarra itself. So they're just a couple of suggestions to get you started to have a think about what there might be on a big scale. Of course, there's also data and numbers and statistics relating to your particular group, club or organisation, and you can always bring those together and put them as evidence in your application. Being specific is really important. I've got a sentence there: the whole community will participate or benefit from this project. Whilst that's nice to hear, sometimes when you're trying to be competitive in a grants program, that probably won't cut it. We look for a little bit more. So who exactly is going to benefit? Will it be your players? Will it be your members? Will it be your board? Will it be parents? Let's try and be a bit more specific about who is going to benefit or how the participation is going to be improved or enhanced from your project. So just a little bit of a chat about budgets. On our website, as well as the help notes to support people through their application, we do have a budget example piece of paper there that you can sort of have a look through and understand for the different categories of grant program what a budget might look like. The example up the top of the screen there is an example for a $5,000 community event or a community support grant application. You'll notice in the income line, the first thing we ask from you is how much do you want or how much do you need to do your project? So you would put in there what you're after. In the column where it says confirmed funding, it would always be no, because it is what you're asking from us. So that's sort of there. And then the income and the notes description section is just there. It's not mandatory, but if you want to put anything else in there that helps us understand anything about your budget line item, then there's the ability to do that there. So that's just a bit of an idea. And the income you could have a cash contribution from your own organisation, which is always good to see in an application to the community grants program, that you're financially committed to contributing to your project. We completely understand and appreciate that that's not always the case. It is not an essential criteria to financially contribute to your project. However, it is good to see if there is a financial commitment there. Other examples of income could be donations or fundraising money from a fundraiser that your club might have done. Business sponsorship might be a part of that. So yeah, any other type of income that you believe will be going towards your project would be great to see listed in your budget. In-kind contributions are donations of time or of materials that the person is not expecting a cash payment for. So an example that I've given in that one there is that a volunteer, or it could be even a qualified painter who happens to be on your committee, has contributed that he would do 20 hours of painting, and he would provide ideally a letter, or it could be an email or something in writing to state that he will be providing his time free of charge for this project. And then in the expenditure column there, you'll see it just balances out. So the income total was 7.5, the expenditure needs to be 7.5. You'll notice that the in-kind contribution of $1,000 in the income is matched with $1,000 in the expenditure. So that's really important there. The little screenshot down the bottom of that slide there is actually from the Smarty Grants portal. I just wanted to put that there to give you a bit of an example of what it looks like when you're going through your application. The total income amount and the total expenditure amount are automatically calculated from the program by whatever you put above that in the budget columns. So that highlighted section, if that number doesn't equal 0, please go back and look at your figures again, because there's obviously been an error somewhere along the way. If your budget is incorrect, it immediately, unfortunately, means that your application would be ineligible and can't proceed to the assessment process. So really, really critical that you make sure your numbers add up. So once the application period closes on the 31st of August, council staff will collate the applications and commence the assessment process. An assessment panel is formed, and as Ellen alluded to in her presentation, we do a thorough read through of all applications and we assess those against the essential criteria. Once the assessment process has been undertaken, recommendations are then presented to council for a final decision, and then applicants are notified usually within 8 weeks of your submission. So ideally around October, applicants are notified of the outcome of their application. Successful projects for the Community Grants Program must be completed within 12 months of getting funded. So make sure you consider this when you're applying. As Ellen mentioned in her presentation as well, if the timelines for the Community Grants Program do not align with your project, it would be an option to reconsider and plan ahead for next year's program, because this is an annual program. Or you could seek other funding options, or come and speak to us about other opportunities we might be aware of that could support your project. We're trying to really foster a planning ahead approach with our community. So our Community Grants Program is structured that it comes out annually and it's the same time every year. So we're trying to allow for groups to plan ahead and be prepared for when the funding cycle comes, and plan for their projects or their events or their activities to happen in cycle with the funding program. If you happen to require an extension of time, which, the last 12 months, 18 months has been an example of that, where things are out of our control and projects have not been able to be completed, extensions can be applied for, and they'll be assessed on each merit as they come in. We will provide you for each successful applicant, council will provide information about what you must do now that you're successful, and part of that is acknowledgement of council support for your project. So through the rebrand of our Community Grants Program this year, we have developed a logo and a bit of branding, so that will be provided to all successful applicants, and all we ask is that logo and acknowledgement gets put on any marketing materials related to your funding project, and then you can also use those when you're reporting on your project to showcase that. An acquittal template is available within your Smarty Grants portal. So once successful applicants are known, Council upload those templates in the Smarty Grants portal, so that once your project's finished, you can jump straight back in there, fill out all the information on how your project went, and submit that back to Council and sign off essentially on your project. A bit of a hot tip is about starting the acquittal process almost at the start of your time frame. So start your evidence collection from the moment you know that you are successful. Keep evidence as you go, make notes of what you spend your money on and where it went. Keep copies of any Facebook posts or flyers, newsletter mentions, and we love photos. So we really like to see the photos of your projects. We like to showcase those where we can. You know, we do an annual report every year, and we have a full section dedicated to our community projects. So we love to showcase our community projects through this program. So keep photos and all of your evidence, but start that process at the start. As soon as you know you're successful, it just makes the process a lot easier at the end if you're not having to backtrack and think of what you did throughout the previous 12 months. So what I'm going to do now is, hopefully this will work, and I'm going to click on this link and take you through. Can you see that, Paul? Yep. Oh, no? Okay, hang on. Oh, hang on. I think I need to. Here we go. There we go. Is that working? Thank you. So this is the Smarty Grants portal. So when you click on the link on Council's website, this is what you will see. So you'll see here that this is our current rounds. We have the Community Events Grant, Community Support Grant, and the Major Community Project Fund. There's more information about each category within each of those. I'm just going to walk through. I'll just click on the Community Support Grant for the purposes of just showing you. They are all laid out very similar. It's just the questions and the addressing the essential criteria that is the main difference. So this is the next stage here. Now, something to note, if you've not used Smarty Grants before, is that you can start an application in Smarty Grants and save it and come back to it as you need to. More than one person can work on the same application. You just need to have the one login. So just be mindful of that. Communicate to your committee that you intend or that you are applying for a community grant, and ensure that the email address that you're using is active and accessed regularly. That is how we communicate for the community grants program, is through those email addresses that are provided and the phone numbers that are provided. But any updates regarding your application are sent via email from the Smarty Grants portal. So it's really important that the email address you provide us is active and accessible quite regularly. So this is the entry platform that you'll see, which just gives you a bit of an idea about what the program's all about. Contact details for us. So this is our main email address here, and you can contact us at any time on that. And of course, Council's phone number to call us. Links to our website so you can see all of the guidelines and the information. As I said, you can save your draft application as you go and come back to it as you need to. And then what happens when you submit, and everything goes through there. So what I'm going to do here is hopefully preview the form here. So this is what your application form will look like when you're actually logged in and go through the process. So the first part is about your eligibility, a little bit about what to note. Here is your eligibility criteria here. So important that you read and understand that. As Ellen did mention too, you can download a copy of this without actually logging into Smarty Grants, so you can pre-read the information to ensure that you are eligible and that your project does align with the category that you're applying for. So that's something that you can consider doing before you jump in and trying to apply. If you believe that you are eligible according to all of the information there, it's just a tick box there. And here is the essential criteria again, that is detailed there. You'll then go into your organisation details. So this is where, if your organisation is eligible, you would put all of your organisation details in here, your organisation name, and then the key contact person that Council can communicate with about your application, phone numbers and email addresses, ABN there. We do ask for your bank details as part of your application process, and this is purely because if you are a successful applicant, we do direct debit the money straight into your bank account once it's been approved. So that's why we ask for the bank account details straight away. This next page here is not relevant for many, but if you happen to be an organisation that uses an auspice or another organisation for the purposes of applying for a grant, this page needs to be filled in. So if your organisation is not an eligible organisation, but you have someone who can support you, that's where it's exactly the same details as the previous page, but it's just letting us know that you're using an auspice for your application. So it's the same setup there. And then the next page here, this is all of the project details. So this is what you're going to tell us about your project. We ask for a project name. We do ask it to be short but descriptive. An example there, Blacktown Dance Hall Painting Project. Lets us know what you're doing and where you're doing it. We do ask for a project summary. We give you 150 words, so a bit more than 25, a bit less than 300. So it's a nice in the middle number there. Again, we're looking for a short description, but we need to understand from the summary pretty clearly what you intend to do. So yeah, try and be pretty descriptive in that 150 words if you can. When you anticipate to start and finish your project, again, this can be left blank if you are not sure, but being mindful that it must be completed within 12 months. So for this particular round, prior to 21st of October next year. And then, yeah, so it's just working through, I guess I just wanted to give you a visual of what, if you have not been into the Smarty Grants program before for our community grants program, just to give you a visual of what it looks like, what the expectation is. So a lot of those questions there are just tick box choices based on that. And then we go here into our essential criteria. So as you can see, I mentioned before that under each of the essential criteria, where possible, we have provided little prompts or suggestions or little hints here about how to answer those questions. So hopefully they provide a little bit of support or clarity around what we might be looking for. Again, read the question and then read it again. It helps to sort of absorb that information and understand what and relate it back to your project. So that's the essential criteria all the way down there. And then down the bottom here is the opportunity to provide letters of support if you have them, or other evidence-based documents that you'd like to attach there. You can upload up to 5 files in this section. The budget section is the next part. So the first thing we want to know is how much you are asking for, and then how much you think, or how much you've budgeted your total project to cost. And then this is a little bit of information down here around how to fill out the budget, some examples of what you could put in the income and the expenditure column, a bit of an explanation as to the different types as we spoke about a little bit earlier. These are drop-down lists here. So when you go into the actual form, you'll click on those and it can give you the income types. This one's got a red asterisk on it because at the very least, we do need to know from the grant program how much you want. So at the very least, you'll have one line item in there saying that you want $5,000 from this program. And then the expenditure table is there underneath. Again, we've got examples of what you could put in there, examples of what can't be funded as part of this particular category. So just be mindful of that. Again, a link to the guidelines if you need to be reminded there. And again, there must be at least one line item detailing what you're going to spend the grant funding on. This is the bit that I was speaking about earlier here. So this column here, this area here and this area here are automatically calculated based on what's been put up above. So then if this area here has anything other than a 0 in it, there's been an error made. So just be sure to go back and have a look at what you've put into your tables. And then this area here down the bottom is where you can upload quotes or evidence of in-kind contributions towards your project. The last page then is a bit of a certification and feedback. Has to be signed off by someone from your committee or your organisation. And then there's a very quick feedback section there around how you found the application process to be. Anything you see marked with a red asterisk is a required field, and you won't be able to progress through the application unless that has been completed. So that's what those ones mean there. So if I close that, it'll take you back there. I'm just going to go back to this one here for you. So in closing, I just wanted to reiterate the key sort of messages, I guess, from Council around our community grants program. Read the guidelines. Please call us if you have any questions about your project. That is meant to say ask questions. I apologise. That's a typo. Start your application early. So applications opened today and they open all the way through until midnight on the 31st of August. But I do encourage you to get into the portal, read the guidelines, have a look at what the application form looks like and be familiar with it. A tip I like to sort of suggest to some applicants is to at least get into the portal. If you know that your project is eligible and your organisation is eligible, get into the portal and at least fill out those first 2 to 3 pages where it's all about your organisation. So your organisation name, address, phone numbers, the emails, all that contact detail. And then you're left and you can really focus on what you want to tell us about your project and your budget. Include your evidence, so start that sooner rather than later, particularly if you're needing letters from people, allow time for those to be included. Be specific with what you're telling us about your project so that we truly understand what it is you're trying to do and why. And ensure your committee, your group or your organisation is aware of your application, whether that's a quick email out to your committee or you've got private Facebook groups or what have you, whatever your communication means are. I think it goes a long way to just making sure that your committee is on board to understand that you're applying for this grant. It also alleviates sometimes the issue of 2 people from the same committee applying for the same program, which has happened before. So just that open communication with your committee or your group about what you're applying for and who's going to be involved in developing that application. And that's it from me. And hopefully that's provided a bit of clarity on our community grants program, and you know where we are if you need to ask any questions. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Katrina. That was really informative, and I had you down for 7:40 to finish, so you're right on. Well done. A couple of points I took away from your presentation too, which was fantastic, was it is an annual program, so it's all about the planning. There is obviously a number of grants and the funding available there. You've given us a heap of information about what you're looking for in the applications, a lot of hot tips, so well done. And I think the other point is all of these guidelines, tips and Smarty Grant link, etc., is all on our council website. So you should be able to access anything there that you need. But as Katrina has said, only an email or phone call away as well. So thank you very much, Katrina. We were planning on a third presenter tonight, but unfortunately, Stephen O'Donoghue won't be presenting tonight. I thank him for his early commitment to support this forum, and we hope to facilitate an opportunity in the future where we can share his funding success stories, because he's got some great stories to share. Overall, there's been a lot of information provided to you all tonight, and quite consistent, I might add, between Ellen and Katrina. Now is the opportunity to ask questions. I know we don't have any questions in the chat as of yet, so please jump in and type some if you do have any. I've got a couple to start the ball rolling. So, might start with Katrina. Is council's, Ellen went through quite a list of assessment steps that the assessor might go through. Is council's process similar to that? That step-by-step that Ellen outlined?
Yes, good question. It is. So councils, once the applications come in and the deadline, sorry, is finished. Yes. So we do a thorough read through of all the applications, and then the essential criteria is assessed. It's weighted. So the assessment panels for each category will go against those essential criteria and weight them against that assessment process, which will then allow us to develop some recommendations based on that. So it is a very similar process. Yes. Thank
you. Ellen, if you can answer one for me, that'd be great. How do you, this is probably not from an assessor point of view, but from someone that's been in the community development, how do you feel about when your grant isn't successful? And I guess, how do you go about moving forward from that to, do you access another grant, or do you, feedback was mentioned in your presentation, but could you be able to outline how you've managed that in your experience?
Yeah, look, I've been successful in a lot of grant applications, but I've also been unsuccessful as well. And, it does leave you feeling a little bit despondent, but I did mention earlier, it's important to get feedback. Where did you go wrong in your application? Did you not describe your project properly? Were you asking for too much money? Was there just such a volume? And your project was very similar to 10 others in the same area, and therefore, they couldn't fund all of them. Sometimes it's just bad luck, and other times there's some really valid reasons. So asking for the feedback on why you were unsuccessful, I think, is the first step. And the second step is then going back to your committee and explaining why the grant application was unsuccessful, and looking at whether it's something that they want to pursue, and then go and look for other funding buckets of money that might be around, or submitting the application again in the next round that opens up, which could be in 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months time. So it really depends on your application, as well as what you're actually applying for. So the feedback might also be about the eligibility of your projects as well. Maybe it was just the wrong funding round that you applied in, and so applying to a different grant round might be useful. Some of the grant applications that I've been assessing recently are for community resilience type projects, and some of them have been in bushfire areas. So there's a separate bucket of money for communities that are in bushfire areas. So we've been able to work with the applicants and move their application across to a grant program that is specifically for them and is going to help them, and that leaves some opportunities for another group to move in there. So sometimes it's, I think one of the other things that I said as well, Paul, was about talking to the program manager, and that's where you can find out, is this the right bucket of money that I'm applying in, and should it be somewhere else? So a whole lot of reasons within there, Paul, sorry about that, but I think getting your feedback first of all is the important thing.
Great, thank you, Ellen. I might ask you one more question too, if I can. And people, you're welcome to jump in with a question if you do have any. I know there has been a lot of information, so it might be just taking it all in. But how you talked about being strategic at the start, I think in your first slide. How much does strategic planning help to support the process when you're seeking funding?
Yeah. Look, having a plan is really important. And if your organisation has a strategic plan, then use that strategic plan to support your application. Katrina also mentioned, the council plan and so on. And it is important that you look at what is in your strategic plan. So I'll take a step back. Anything that's in your strategic plan of your organisation, that's what you should be working on. And therefore, if you're applying for funding for a project that has got nothing to do with any of the strategies in your plan, then why are you applying for it? So how is it going to benefit your organisation? So, the assessor might go, well, where did this project come from? It's kind of out of the blue and it's not related to anything. So having your strategic plan is really good because it shows how your project does relate, or it should relate in that respect. And the assessor, whether it's council or somebody else, is is looking for that evidence. Katrina also mentioned evidence, and yes, we do love evidence, whether it's statistics or a strategic plan or a project plan. That is evidence that shows there's a need for the project, the committee have thought about it and they all agree to it, and that there is defined community benefit, specific community benefit, as Katrina said as well.
Thank you. That's we've got a question on the chat, so thanks, Elise. Katrina, there's a question just about aligning with the goals on the 2021-25 council plan, which I know is in draft at the minute, but hopefully it'll be adopted soon.
Yes, thank you, Elise. That's a really great question. And one that is quite common when we're going through the application process with the community grants program. So as Paul alluded to, it is in draft format at the moment, but the goals of the council plan, there's three. They are livability, growth, and sustainability. And essentially what we're looking for when we're stating that we like applications or projects to align with the goals of the strategic direction of council is to just ensure that things that the community grants program are funding are going to support those high level strategic areas that we see Gannawarra aiming for into the future. So when we talk about, for example, and links, I can say links to all the strategic documentation, such as the council plan that we refer to, are all within the Smarty Grants portal. So you can connect straight in to have a look at the draft version of what the plan is at the moment and understand sort of the layout of it and what it looks like and what it might mean. So the livability goal, for example, is about enhancing the wellbeing and livability of Gannawarra. That could be through creative infrastructure and services. So that goal connects back to community health and wellbeing and livability of our area. So if your project is about enhancing that sort of area, that could be around facility improvements, for example, to make sure that the community has access to nice services or nice buildings or nice areas to undertake whatever activity you might be looking to do. Growth is around growing the Gannawarra through a diverse and broad economy. And then we've got sustainability, which is around long-term financial and environmental sustainability. So your projects could link in with that in a number of different ways. We've given a few examples in the Smarty Grants portal there, but I think the main takeaway, I guess, would be to ensure you just look at Council's website or have a look at those links that take you to some of our strategic plans that we refer to through the application guidelines. Just to understand that there is a connection between that high-level strategic place that the council works on delivering to, and how that can relate down to on-the-ground execution of events or activities or programs that our community are seeking to deliver to enhance whatever area of the community they might be involved in. If that hasn't quite answered your question, Elise, I'm more than happy to take it offline and I can elaborate with you one-on-one if you've got a particular project in mind. But essentially, it's about understanding that things that we're looking for the community to deliver will in some way connect up to that high-level strategic plan of council.
Great, thank you, Katrina. I've just got one question for you too. There may be some people online tonight who successful in council's program last year. How much funding does council give out in this funding? And you know, do we tend to get a bit more than oversubscribed than what we normally have? Correct. So what are we looking at that might help people understand the context of, you know, sometimes you miss out not because you don't have a good project, but because there's just not enough money.
Absolutely. And Alan mentioned that just before. So for some context, I believe off the top of my head, Paul, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but off the top of my head, the last round of the Major Community Projects Fund, so the bucket of money, for want of a better word, is $250,000 in our annual budget for that program. And I believe the last round we received just under $1 million worth of applications. Heavily oversubscribed. Many great projects were submitted. It simply came down to the fact that there was not enough money in that allocation to be able to support every single application. Our community grants program is always every year heavily oversubscribed. We often have in excess of 20 applications to the community grants, to the community support category. Overall, the community grant, the community support and event categories have, I think it's about $84,000 to support applicants. And we always far exceed that $84,000 allocation. So to give a bit of context, that's why it's so important to really plan your projects and really communicate to us what they are and why you want to do them and what benefit they're going to have to the community, to really make them stand out and justify the investment from the community grants program.
Great, thanks Katrina. As we don't have any more questions, we might, I think, finish up. So in closing out the forum, I just want to thank those that have helped pull this evening together, including Katrina and Denise Frizzo at Council. There's been a considerable amount of time to enable this event to occur, even an online one such as this. So secondly, thank you all to those who signed up and participated in the forum this evening. It takes your attendance and contributions to make these nice a success. And look, this is our first one, and we hope to do them on an annual basis as well. And finally, thanks to our presenters, particularly Ellen, your experience in this space, and I guess it's inspiring and opportunity to understand how it all works in the back end often, but obviously your community development experience as well really gives us some context into how a project can be formed. So thank you all again, and best of luck with your future funding rounds. But as Katrina said, Council, you can touch base on grants at gsc.vic.gov.au, email us, and if there's anything else we can help you with, very happy to help. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Katrina. Bye, everyone.